Welcome, my awesome listeners, to another episode of Lessons from Success. Today, Craig Somerville joins us from Reload Media. Now, Reload is an internationally recognized marketing agency that's been making huge waves with its unique style and successful marketing. Craig and I talk about everything marketing and his fundamentals for both offering an amazing service to his clients and how he's managed to create such a strong team within Reload as well. Now, this episode is for anyone, especially those interested in marketing and considering starting an agency. But honestly, if you're hiring a marketing agency in the future, it really does help to listen to this episode as well. Now, before we jump in, don't forget to give us a follow on Lessons from Success _podcast and on our Facebook at Lessons from Success as well. We'd also love a rate, review and subscribe via iTunes. And if you leave your details on there, you'll get a personal thanks from me. Well, without further ado, let's get this episode started. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. On the show, we've got Craig Somerville from Reload Media. Let's get started and have a little bit of a chat about your business, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So tell me how you got started and what your background is and how this has all sort of came to fruition.
Sure. So this story, I guess, goes back about 11 or 12 years now. And I was still studying at university in a marketing program. And I got an opportunity to join a serial entrepreneur, a guy called Lou Jury, who had previously started a couple of businesses and sold them himself. And he had just gone out again and was looking to establish, a digital marketing offering in various forms. And so I sort of joined him while I was still studying, doing about 15 hours a week kind of thing. And we sort of started with that, started to take off, picked up a few clients here and there. And sort of 12 years later, we've got 70 staff sort of spread across the world. So that's the 60-second version, shall we say, of where it's all come from.
That's amazing. So you've got staff all around the world. Where are your three offices at the moment? So you've got one in Brisbane here, and where are the other ones?
Yeah, so Brisbane is head office. We have about 40 staff here. We also have 15 in Manila and 15 in London. And so those three offices essentially service our clients across those three regions. So Brisbane obviously looks after the ANZ markets. The Manila office looks after Asia Pacific, and then we've got our London office, which looks after UK Europe.
Yeah, you mentioned that you haven't really been in Brisbane that much at all this year. Where have you spent most of your time, and sort of what are the projects been, if you don't mind sharing?
It's certainly felt like that at times. One of the fortunate things for us is that our business is very much growing right across the region at the moment, and so certainly probably for the last 12 months and longer, we've had a lot of our staff, not just myself, doing lots of different travel throughout the region, across lots of different markets, helping clients with lots of different types of projects. That might be digital marketing campaigns themselves, it might be SEO challenges they're facing, it might be digital transformation projects more broadly in terms of the things that they are trying to achieve using digital platforms and channels. So it's quite a mix of stuff, but it does mean that, we have a pretty broad section of clients, I guess, that span the APAC region, and that keeps us pretty busy on the planes and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the good thing as well is you're not just repeating the same work over and over again. You're consistently doing new projects and innovative projects and whatnot. Yeah,
it's definitely one of the things that I think stands out for us in terms of the way in which we approach marketing. Our philosophy has always been that to do marketing properly, you have to really understand the customer journey. Yeah. And so our first engagements with most of our clients is actually to understand how their customers actually go on a buying journey. So what sort of triggers, start the search process for a particular product or service that particular company is selling? How does that consumer go about the research from there? What information do they want answered? What questions do they have? Who are they weighing up against in terms of competitors and those sort of things? And once you start to get a bit of an understanding about how that customer journey goes, all the way through to retention, loyalty, online reviews, all those sorts of things, you can really start to tailor your messaging, tailor your campaigns, really come up with some innovative ways of reaching potential consumers at different stages of that buying journey. And that's probably the big change in how marketing has evolved, and it's certainly the belief that we take into the campaigns that we run.
Yeah, for sure. Is there any interesting or sort of, I guess, your favorite case studies along the way that you'd like to share, just to show the way that you do the innovative marketing?
I probably can't give away too much in terms of the individual campaigns that we run for clients. Obviously, that the campaigns that we create for them. They probably don't want the secret sauce shared, shall we say?
Of course.
It does ultimately come back to creating something individual and unique for each individual client based on how their customers go about that buying process. Yeah.
No, that's okay. What about the first? I guess when you started up here, what was the first big client that you got that made you think, well, shit, this is something that we could really make into quite a big agency?
When we first started, and this was sort of way back, I'm trying to think, 2008, 2009 kind of thing, things started to take off. And for us, we picked up a lot of small businesses in and around the Brisbane area. So we picked up lots of different businesses that were doing all sorts of things across pest control and local accountants and plumbers and all those sorts of things. But probably in those first couple of years, we picked up a couple of big clients in the property development space. We picked up a couple of big clients in the retail space, and in particular one that sort of probably flipped our focus or started to send us on a bit of a different trajectory was when we won the Subway account, which we held for probably 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
But that was an account for us that sort of, I suppose, announced us as an agency that could do pretty significant and serious campaigns at a national level, and that sort of set off a chain reaction that led to the sort of selection of clients that we've kind of got today.
Do you find that with most marketing agencies, because we spoke about this a little bit before the interview, like a lot of them are popping up now, and a lot of them are, let's just say, they're not doing as well as they'd hoped. Do you think that landing the first big client would be the hardest challenge, and if all goes well from there, it's kind of just a chain reaction most of the time, or?
I think there's actually probably two parts to it. One is that the market has changed, and that the barriers to entry for marketing agencies has changed pretty considerably. So when we started 12 years ago, you really could, in many ways, get away with being sort of working out of a small office or a bedroom operator, having a broad mix of skills and kind of getting by. Now with what I suppose the expectations are around digital marketing more generally, there is a lot of bigger barriers to entry to get things like Google partner status and Facebook partner status and all these different things that bigger brands are looking for, and that they're expecting in agencies that they work with. So I do think that part of our success was about the timing, and making sure that we were in the market when it was a bit more in its infancy and we had an opportunity to take it to the next level. So I think that plays a role. But then secondly, to your point, absolutely, there's no question that winning that first big one, the sort of household name, something that gives you a bit of recognition, a bit of kudos in other people you might be talking to, definitely plays a big part, I guess, in setting off a bit of a chain reaction, because one big client, big clients like to see that you're working with other big clients. People who are running complex campaigns like to see that you run other complex campaigns. And so getting those first couple of runs on the board is pretty important.
Yeah. You spoke about Facebook marketing status and Google marketing status as well. How do you go about getting that, and what is that, just for the people that don't know too much about the digital marketing space? Yeah,
so in our game there are lots of different tech platforms and parties and advertising platforms and all that sort of stuff, and a lot of them have various levels of accreditation based on how much you do with them, and also the skills that you bring to it. So within, say, the Google status, for example, where our actual skill set is sort of measured by Google based on the campaigns we're running, the results we're getting for our clients, and they're actually, rating us and sort of saying, as a result of what we're doing for our clients, that we're one of the top agencies in Australia who are, with that particular accreditation. So those sorts of things help send a signal that you actually know what you're doing, which is always nice. And it's not just us saying, trust us, we've got this. It's actually sort of third parties saying, yeah, these guys have been through the program, they know what they're doing, their results speak for themselves, and it sort of gives a bit of a symbol around that. And there's lots of things like that in our industry. And for us, it's always just been a case of, once we've proven that we can deliver on a particular service or area, let's make sure we've got the accreditation or the proof, or the award or whatever else it is that shows off the fact that we can do that.
Yeah. Speaking now to sort of, I guess, the people that have just started a marketing agency or are thinking about going into doing so, how would you recommend that they start out, and sort of what can they do to gain that credibility, I guess, as quick as possible?
I think the first thing is you just got to get runs on the board. it's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? But it does ring true. In that the very first question that we get asked in the vast majority of sales, opportunities is, what have you done? What other campaigns have you done? What things that are similar to us? And so there's not really much more you can do when you're first starting out than getting something, getting your foot in the door somewhere, getting an opportunity that allows you to prove yourself. And that may be meaning doing it for free or doing it at a pretty significant discount to get those opportunities. We certainly weren't charging the prices we are today back when we first started. It is that sort of crawl before you can walk kind of approach.
Yeah, I think that goes the same for a lot of new business looking to get good strategic partnerships on board. It's do it completely under cost, if not completely free, and then that way, once you've got the runs on the board, you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've done, and I've certainly seen lots of other agencies do, is particularly when they first start out or they enter new markets or those sorts of things, they will decrease the cost of the service, and they'll actually say to the client, we're giving you a pretty significant discount here on the condition that we can use your logo and we can use you as a case study and those sort of things in the future. And that's often a good way to get those first couple on the board.
Yeah, well, who doesn't love free marketing, right? I mean, it's kind of the dream, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of brands out there that are still unsure about this whole, digital marketing and marketing sort of effectiveness more generally, and so it's those sort of skeptics that are I suppose, well suited to that sort of approach.
Do you still come across that a fair bit? A lot of people with skepticism in the digital marketing space, I guess, especially a lot of the older companies that have been around for multiple generations.
There is skepticism. I don't necessarily think that it's tied to older companies or newer companies and those sort of things. Sometimes it can be that they had just a bad experience with another agency or a campaign that was run previously, and as a result, they've sort of been burnt by that. And that's not necessarily to do with how long the company's been around. I think it's a natural resistance to change mentality that sort of are inbuilt in humans in many ways, and I think that just flows through into marketing like it does in every other facet of life. And so whenever we're proposing something new, whenever we're proposing some sort of tactic or campaign or anything that hasn't been done before, or that hasn't been tried before, or they haven't tried before, you're always going to have to deal with some level of skepticism and make sure you've got the evidence on the table and got the stats to back it up, basically.
Is that the best way you appeal to companies, is putting the stats on the table and showing them exactly what the results can be, or?
I think every client is different on that sort of stuff, and our job is to work out what are the motivators internally and externally, and what's going to move their clients and what's going to make their own customers purchase. If they're a product company or a service company or those sort of things. So it is a horses for courses approach in that sense, in that we have to try and work out what is going to be most appropriate for that particular business environment. And this is the thing that again, I sort of come back to, that sort of separates us from the way a lot of other agencies run, is that we do take an incredibly unique approach to each individual client. And so that adds a lot of complexity on the internal side of things for our business, but it means that we can create a better relationship with the client moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. It's something I've definitely noticed in, I guess, meeting all these entrepreneurs. I've heard frequent stories and mainly horror stories about digital marketing. And a lot of that has just been, they come on and they just use a either a stock picture or a picture of the product, and then basically write the same old status repeatedly and hoping for a different result. I think they keep consistency there, but they don't keep there's no uniqueness, there's no change. There's nothing like that, really. Yeah,
and the big trend in marketing at the moment is personalization. So how can you personalize the message in the ad? How can you personalize the ad copy? How can you personalize the website experience? How can you personalize the emails that people are receiving? There's a whole range of areas where, as marketers, what we're trying to do is personalize the communication. Because if we're personalizing the communication, it doesn't feel so much like marketing and annoying advertising. It actually feels like something that's of value to the customer. And if we can do that, then we sort of get rid of this anti-marketing bias from a consumer. And we are genuinely trying to be helpful in that way. And it's sort of a win-win situation that's being created between the brand and the customer. That's what marketing should be doing in its absolute purest sense. But But as you say, that's not always the approach that either brands or agencies take, and that's the guilt is probably shared on both sides of the fence there.
Oh, definitely. It's interesting you say that, because I remember when, I'll just use Facebook as a prime example. I remember when Facebook sponsored ads first came on, and it was intrusive. Like, you'd be scrolling through your normal feed and you'd see, a big blocky, crappy advertising right in front of your face, and it was never anything you're interested in. But now as you scroll through, I'm definitely realizing, like, a lot of the time I won't even realize it's sponsored until I look, just because it's so compatible with what I've been looking at on Facebook and whatnot anyway, that it's just, I assume it's one of the pages that I've followed or something like that that's been posted. So yeah, it's definitely adapting that way.
Yeah, and all the platforms, all the advertising platforms, the social media platforms, the search engines, what they're all trying to do is provide more relevant content to users. They're trying to tailor it based on your interests, based on things that they think you're actually going to be wanting to be engaging with and seeing and watching and viewing and all those sorts of things. And fundamentally, that's what's driving their development. Now they have steps forward and steps back in that process, but that is generally speaking the direction that they're all trying to achieve.
It feels just, it makes common sense, obviously, because that'd be a better ROI for the company as well, marketing to someone that's actually interested in their product compared to being right in your face in something that I couldn't be remotely interested in. And it would definitely be better for the company.
Yeah, I mean, Google's a good example in that. And that Google, for most of its products, is only getting paid when someone clicks on the ad, which means if the ad isn't relevant, then Google's not getting paid. And so there's a vested interest there for them to make sure that the advertising that is put forward is actually of interest, is resonating with that potential end user, and that there's some reason that they should click through, that isn't sort of just a, bland broadcast message. So there is a vested interest there for them to improve the quality of marketing more generally.
Yeah, a bit of I guess a generalized question, but where do you see marketing going in the short term to long term future?
Talk about a broad question.
Yeah.
That's a topic that could have days on itself. I think broadly speaking, we're seeing increased personalization. We're seeing a move towards machine learning and auto bidding, and people doing things like using the power of automation to power their marketing as well. So simple examples about how people set up their email sequences, or how people set up their retargeting sequences on things like Facebook and Google and those sorts of products, where based on actions that customers do or don't do on websites or otherwise, the ads that then are served to them following that are dependent on those actions. But those campaigns, shall we say, are set up in a way that is automated from the moment they go live. And so the skill comes back to the strategy. And so what that means for the future of marketing, and particularly marketing personnel, is that we're not going to be in there necessarily manually creating campaign targeting and all those sorts of things like we probably have been in the past. What we're going to be doing is coming up with a strategy about how a consumer should go on a purchase journey, how a consumer needs to be delivered certain messaging or certain offers at various points in that journey, and then using the tools at our disposal that allow for that personalization, allow for that automation to actually create and craft a campaign off the back of it. And so the skills that marketers are going to need are going to sort of shift into that new way of thinking.
Yeah, that's interesting. If you don't mind, we'll flip to you as an entrepreneur now, if that's okay. So how did you know that you always wanted to sort of run a business or be the head of a business, or was it something that you just sort of fell into throughout university, as we spoke about earlier, or what's been the situation with that?
It's an interesting one, because I still don't necessarily think of myself as an entrepreneur. As I mentioned at the beginning, I joined Lou when he sort of started the business, and I came on as the first employee. And then since then, the dynamic, I guess, has sort of changed, and the two of us have grown together and grown the business as a team sort of since then. But I didn't come up with the idea of starting the business, and I didn't certainly sit there and go, I want to create my own business. And so I kind of probably had entrepreneurship thrust upon me, as opposed to necessarily starting with that as the default position. So it's an interesting one in that sense, and I probably don't consider myself a little bit of an entrepreneur in many respects, because I didn't sit there and look at a market and go, this industry is ripe for disruption and all those sorts of things. For me, the journey was pretty simple, and that I wanted to get a start in somewhere in marketing. The opportunity popped up to join Lou and be essentially the first employee through the doors. That worked out pretty well in terms of we sort of have a pretty complementary skill set in the sense of we have different strengths and weaknesses, and those two things came together really well, and as a result it resonated. Clients resonated with it. We were able to deliver a really quality service, and then the two of us were able to sort of take it and start to grow, and over time we've added obviously the team around us that have taken that to another level altogether. So I don't know if it's necessarily the classic entrepreneurship journey in that sense.
You've been around for 10 years now, Reload Agency, is that correct? It was 2008?
Yeah, give or take. Yeah, I think we're about, coming up on 11 this year.
Yeah, terrific. So how did the growth sort of happen? So you would have first came on board in 2008 when the doors were first opened. And then how did the sort of, did you remain in Australia for quite a long period of time, or did you expand internationally quite quickly, or how did the growth trajectory work?
Yeah, we were a little bit different in that we kind of went international quite early on in the piece. So as you say, we sort of started in 2008, and by 2010 we took an opportunity to set up, I guess, a presence in the UK and in New Zealand. And initially that was sort of a small office, 1 or 2 people, bit of a web presence, all that sort of stuff, just to basically see what was happening. And at that time, the Australian dollar was really good. Rents in both Auckland and London were pretty low by comparison. I remember when we first opened our doors in London, we were paying more per square metre here in Brisbane for rent than what we were in London.
Wow. And
that was a reflection of what the UK economy was like at the time, and what the Australian dollar strength was, and all those sorts of things. And so in terms of timing, it was probably if we were going to have a shot, it was a fairly low risk time to do so, and it sort of gave us a bit of a crack at it. So yeah, it was a slow burn for us, certainly initially overseas. We sort of spent probably the first 3 or 4 years building it up to about 4 or 5 staff, particularly in the UK office. And then once we sort of hit a bit more maturity in what our offering was all about and the brands we were picking up and those sort of things, we sort of turned the burners on a little bit more over there, and have sort of been able to grow it much more quickly over the last few years.
Yeah. Do you plan to do more work in Australia, or would you like to grow your international presence further?
That's an interesting question. It's look, I think that each of the markets have got their own teams now. Each of the markets have got their own general managers who essentially are running those businesses in those regions, and so each of them will have their own growth plans for the business, and that's part of the philosophy that I certainly bring and want to bring to Reload more generally, is that we've got some amazing people. Those people are given pretty large amounts of responsibility to run various sections of the business, various brands within it, various offices within it. And my belief is that if you've got great people, give them the remit, give them the direction and the vision, and then get out of their way, because they're the ones who are going to make that happen. So to answer the question about growth, yes, we do have big objectives around all the markets that we're in at the moment. I think there's different ways we're going to be able to grow in each of the different regions at the moment, but it's the strength of the people who are sort of overseeing that, I think, that are going to get us there.
When we talk about marketing, I guess, would you be able to share some of the differences between marketing to an Australian versus someone in the UK versus someone in the Philippines, for example? Just some real standouts about how you would have a differentiating strategy in each.
I think it's interesting because the first thing is I don't see any differences in consumers between regions so much as between every individual consumer. So if we were to sort of say, is there a way that Brits purchase certain products differently to the way Australians purchase different products? Yeah, there is, but there's more differences between 2 Australians and the way that they purchase a product rather than between 2 sort of average groups of consumers, shall we say. So, and this comes back to the whole customer journey approach. If you're not willing to put in the time to understand how an individual consumer goes through the purchase journey for your product or service, then you're not going to be able to tailor it accordingly. And I think generalizations around demographics and regions and geographies and age brackets and all that sort of stuff don't help with that. So if it's in our industry, for example, we hear the cliche all the time that old people aren't going to be engaging on digital platforms, and that it's the young consumers who really want to get on the web and purchase online and engage through mobile apps and all that sort of stuff. But when you actually break down the figures and when you actually get into the nitty-gritty of it, while those broad things might be true in certain spaces and certain sectors and that sort of stuff, it does not mean that you're not going to have digitally savvy older consumers and digitally naive younger consumers. And if you start treating them all homogeneously, you really miss out on marketing opportunities as a result. So it comes back to that whole customer journey led approach to kind of go, okay, so what are the different behaviors of those customers? What are the different mentalities of those customers, and can we target them differently based on their behavior rather than based on their demographics?
Yeah. Has there been a region that you've had the most fun working with or in?
I don't know if there's so much of which one's had the most fun. I enjoy all the stuff that we're doing across lots of different regions, just because of the fact that there is little nuances about how they do business and the different ways that we engage with clients and those sort of things. I think it's more, doing business internationally is an exciting part of the job. It's a part of the job that gives an awful lot of rewarding experiences, both for me and the team that are delivering that. And it creates career opportunities for our guys as well. Right now we've got, I think, 5 employees sitting in the London office who are on secondment from Australia. We just had one of our original London employees go back to the UK after a 2-year secondment here in Australia. We do that sort of stuff, a lot. We have a lot of trips going on between the offices, as well as servicing clients that, sit somewhere else in the world. So I think the international piece for us on that side of things is more just that it adds an extra layer of what we can do for our people and for our clients.
Yeah, for sure. You spoke about getting terrific general managers in each region, and that's a great way to do it, is to just hire them and then let them do their own thing. How have you gone about finding these people, especially internationally?
Most of them have come from within. In fact, all of them have come from within. Okay. We're a big believer in developing our people, and it kind of shows, I guess, in our industry. The industry averages for marketing agencies and the sort of general perspective, I guess, on what it's like to work at a marketing agency is pretty bad.
Yeah.
You hear a lot of horror stories about high turnover and not very long tenure and working late nights and working weekends and having to get that pitch ready for Monday morning and all this sort of stuff. And right from the word go, we've been really, really strict on ourselves around 9-to-5 work cultures, around making sure that we are valuing people, making sure we're putting time into the culture to stop those sort of things from happening. And it kind of shows. So the sort of 3 senior leaders, shall we say, across the business have been here for 9 years, and 5 years respectively. All of them have come into the business kind of as their first or second job straight out of uni kind of thing, and have grown as the business has grown. And that's a story that's repeated pretty much right across the world for us, that our senior leaders, our management team, our senior strategists and those sort of things have largely joined us very, very early on in their career, either straight out of uni or not long thereafter, and have gone on a journey with us where they've developed their skills, they've got opportunities, they've traveled the world, and that for me is a pretty sort of exciting part of what we get to do.
Absolutely, yeah, and it promotes so much loyalty for the company as well, compared to as you said, the horrible pay, the late nights, and the hustling your ass off for next to nothing in other agencies, it seems.
Yeah, and I think part of that is a realization of what agency life is, in that one of the absolute downsides of agency life is we don't get to set our own deadlines. You're working with clients, they've got marketing objectives, they've got marketing campaigns. The one thing we can't control is when that campaign's got to go live, and the subsequent deadlines that sort of flow on from that are set by an external party, in this case the client. What we can control is how we work around those, and the expectations that we internally set for our people around delivering on those, not burning ourselves out, making sure that we're looking after one another, pushing back to clients when stuff is unreasonable, and getting rid of clients over the years that have not been willing to compromise on work-life balance rather for our staff. And those little things, I think, have meant that we've been able to keep people engaged and develop those careers that maybe wouldn't have happened in other places.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like here, the positives would definitely outweigh those small negatives, which you get in absolutely any industry, right? Every industry's got its negatives, but I definitely feel, from what I've seen personally, a lot of other places, the negatives far outweigh the positives in a lot of regard, and they kind of I've heard of a few places factoring in extremely high turnover, which to me, if you're factoring in high turnover within your business, like I would take a strong look at your business as to why the turnover is so high.
And I think part of it is that the industry has just accepted that as the norm. There's a lot of senior leaders within the industry more broadly who just assume that 30% turnover every year is the norm, and they just build their businesses around that. And sometimes that also then is reflected in what what sort of happens when people are coming out of university and those sort of things, where they see agency life as a 18-month to 2-year stepping stone to something else. And what we've really tried to do is change that assumption, or challenge that assumption, that actually no, you can create a pretty cool career here that is going to potentially involve international opportunities. It's going to involve new skills. It's going to involve moving sideways and working with lots of different clients in different areas and those sort of things. And we put a lot of effort into creating that. And so it's probably the area of Reload that I'm most proud of, is that we've been able to create so many cool career opportunities for lots of different people over the years.
Yeah.
And that's probably the thing that gives me the most satisfaction out of the whole process.
No, for sure. I can only imagine how amazing it would be to have a secondment to London or over to Manila or something like that. I think with the best way to deal with millennials, especially in the workplace at this stage, is to offer them these opportunities, if available, of course, within your own business, because we do love the travel and we love getting out there and all those sorts of things. But unfortunately, the majority of ways that we can do that is just bar work and ski lodge work and those sorts of things. But you kind of, offering that in an actual professional agency it's incredible, really.
And I think, and on that point, I think different people are sort of attracted to different things. So yeah, there is certainly a subset of our workforce that absolutely loves the opportunity to travel and those sort of things. But at the same time, we've also got some, parents with young kids and those sort of things, where you have to do different things. You have to make your culture adapt and change. And our industry, as you correctly, sort of alluded to, our industry is very Gen Y centric. It's a very young industry more broadly. And as I think, we evolve, and as our industry evolves, and, in 10 years' time, we're talking about, people who are the experienced ones in our sector being in their 30s, 40s, 50s, we have to, as a business, adapt around that as well. So there's a lot of stuff I think that sort of leads on to, and it's something that I'm always very consciously aware of, is making sure that as our industry matures and as our people mature, that we are maturing as well as a business, so that we can continue to support those people when they get beyond their 20s, and traveling to London and all that sort of stuff is not so much an appeal as an actual drawback, and making sure that we are providing something for everybody and as part of that culture as well.
Yeah, I guess tailoring, if you can tailor, your marketing services to each company and each consumer journey, why not tailor your HR to make sure that everyone is happy?
And that's pretty much the philosophy that we're trying to do every day.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. Speaking about yourself now, if you could go back in time to talk to your younger self, or even when you first started or joined this business, I should say, what would you say, and would there be anything that you would have changed along the way?
It's a really good question, actually. I'm not sure.
This one usually stumps everyone.
To be honest, that guy, who started doing this 11 years ago, probably wouldn't have listened anyway. So, I'm not sure how useful the advice would be. No, I don't think there was necessarily anything that I would sort of do differently or all that sort of stuff. I think that take opportunities when they come along is pretty much the mantra for me. And don't be afraid to get something wrong, to fail, and to learn from that. I think that's the other piece that comes out. It's something that I've always tried to take on board, is when something doesn't go to plan, when something hasn't worked exactly as the way we would have liked it to, is like, what are we going to learn about that, and what are we going to do to move forward? And we apply that in everything we do business-wise, but I think it's certainly something that personally drives me as well. But not sure what I would have said to my younger self. As I said, it's one of those ones where I don't know what it would have, what the effect would have been anyway.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't have listened to yourself. I know I probably wouldn't have if a decade on he came and spoke to me. Well, has there been any, I always like to talk about failure or hardships just because it humanizes the whole business process and sort of coming up from the ground. Has there been any significant milestones, or I should say hurdles, that you've had to jump over with Reload that have been extremely challenging? Or?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no business grows to the level that we are or grows to any level of success really without sort of overcoming challenges along the way. I think we've made lots of mistakes in terms of how we recruited at various stages. I think we made mistakes about how we structured teams at various points. I think we made mistakes about even just like simple things like what we invested software wise and what we tried to build ourselves and what we tried to execute. And there's probably dozens and dozens and dozens of those sorts of mistakes, shall we say, that have occurred. And it comes back to that approach that I was just talking and alluding to, is that we've got to be willing to make those mistakes, but then look at why we made them, what we could do differently moving forward, and then work hard not to make those same mistakes again. I got no problem with making a mistake once. I think that should be part of every business's approach, is a willingness to make a mistake once. It's when it becomes systematic and you're doing it 2 and 3 and 4 times, that's when you've got to start thinking that there's a problem. But no, there's lots of challenges. I think if I was to pinpoint one good mistake for context, many years ago we made a decision that we thought we should start building our own sort of digital marketing software product, for lack of a better term, that would allow us to report and manage and measure and a whole heap of other things on lots of different digital marketing activities. And we spent, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars over probably 2 or 3 years trying to build this ourselves, before realizing that actually what we were good at had nothing to do with the software product and had nothing to do with the tech side of things behind the scenes. And that realization was a pretty big one, to kind of go, actually what we're really, really good at here doesn't need this product. And we just scrapped the whole thing. Wow. And just sort of one day made the decision that no, this is not the path to go down, and pulled the plug.
Wow. How did that decision come about? Were you literally just sitting there one day and had a realization within a meeting, or?
Look, I'd love to claim credit for it, but it actually wasn't me who made that call. And again, this is where it comes back to the people that we have around. Our current group CEO, who was in a role that sort of oversaw part of that project back then, was the one who actually came to us and said, we've got a zombie project here, a project that's basically, a dead project walking kind of thing. It's chewing down money and resources, and it's not going to achieve what we want it to. And she recommended that we pull the plug. And I think about 5 minutes after she gave me the information, I went, yep, let's do it. And the whole thing was scrapped.
It sounded like you knew in the back of your mind that it wasn't really going anywhere anyway, sort of thing.
I don't even think, though I think part of the problem for me was that I hadn't really put the effort into looking at it. And sometimes it takes someone else to be able to, come at it without the bias. And obviously I was a bit more attached to the project as well, having, sort of helped with the initial setup of it and all that sort of stuff. So someone coming in with a bit of a clean slate and without that emotional bias necessarily is often what you need to get those realizations.
Yeah. Let's flip it to a more positive note now. Some of the best milestones that you've had so far within business?
There's been a lot, to be honest. If I was to pinpoint a couple of moments, we had a really big one in 2014 where we actually picked up the award for Australia's Best Customer Service.
Oh wow!
So it's an award that's put on by the Customer Service Institute of Australia, and every year they put out surveys and they look at your clients and they look at your processes and they go through your business from sort of top to bottom to rate and review how you're actually engaging with customers and clients in our case. And we were very, very lucky that year in that, again, the current general manager of the business had gone through and really put a huge emphasis on, over the preceding 2 or 3 years, increasing and improving our service, making sure that we were really getting to the bottom of what clients were wanting to achieve, tailoring everything we were doing around that. And she'd put in place a program over the preceding couple of years that had just transformed what we were doing. And so we put that forward into the competition process, and we were lucky enough to walk away with the sort of the Queensland Award, the Small Business Award, and then we actually won the Australia's Best of the Best. So for the sort of best customer service in Australia of any size business in any industry.
Wow!
And that was a very, very satisfying milestone, because it was something that strategically was really important to us to stand apart from a lot of other agencies out there. And it was also something that had probably been 2 or 3 years in the making before that kind of changed the game. And it sort of put us a bit more on a national playing field, I guess, and put us alongside a lot of other brands that were household names, and was a pretty satisfying moment.
Yeah, for sure. Did you notice getting a lot of clients from that specifically, or?
I don't know if it was necessarily that you pick up clients from that, because they're not necessarily, in the audience being there, but it was the flow-on effects that it created around being able to back up the claims you were making about the service that you had. And so from then on, when you're having those conversations with clients and you're making promises about what you're going to do and how you're going to work with them and how this project's going to work and how this campaign's going to go, there was a little bit more credibility behind those statements, because someone else had been through our business, reviewed our processes, looked at how we engage with clients and said, actually, yeah, you guys are really, really good at this. And that meant that we just had a little bit more weight behind those claims.
Yeah. Is there any fundamentals you'd like to share, not necessarily just for someone starting a marketing agency or anything like that, but any fundamentals of just running a business in general that you'd like to share, just for the listeners that are getting started or quite new to this whole thing?
I think it's universal to every business, but focus on your people. We're a professional services firm fundamentally, and our people in that sense are our product. And so what we do to look after them, engage them, make sure we're providing opportunities for them, and those sort of things are fundamentally what is going to drive our success and is going to drive the success of most businesses that have a product that has got to be, or a service that is delivered by people. And so, yeah, for me, it's focus on culture. It's work out what your people want. It's make sure you're putting time into those people and doing as much as you possibly can to keep improving that. You're not going to get it right all the time, and we certainly don't. But it's the constant desire to improve what we're doing and be better at it tomorrow than what we are today. That for me is the fundamental driver.
Yeah, for sure. No, well, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners? Any way that we can sort of get in contact with you or anything like that?
No, I think you've sort of covered everything else. Yeah, you'll find obviously us online on our website and through our social accounts as well. So always happy to reach out through there.
Awesome, perfect. So the Instagram handle is just Reload Media.
So you probably get us on Twitter, Reload_media.
Yep.
And then obviously through the website, reloadmedia.com.au.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for your time.
No worries. Thanks very much for having me.
Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning into the show today. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed it, and jump over to lessonsfromsuccess.com.au and make sure you jump on that email list so I can notify you as soon as any more shows come out. I'm your host, Bryn Turner, and thank you so much for joining us.